Yeah, meditation helps me a lot. Since my stroke, I've always been interested in that side of, I guess, well-being, pretty much my whole life. And after having a stroke, I've kind of reinforced that and began to follow, I guess, spirituality and meditation and positive believing. And yeah, meditation helps me. The stroke has caused a bit of anxiety, so it helps me just to, settle those anxious thoughts. And yeah, and any situation, it might only be, sometimes it might be a few minutes when I've pulled over on the side of the road to pick up one of my kids at school, and I'll just practice breathing. So yeah, it's very helpful.
This is the Recovery After Stroke podcast with Bill Gassiamis, helping you navigate recovery after stroke.
Bill from recoveryafterstroke.com. This is episode 29, and my guest today is Antonio Iannella. Antonio is a father of two, musician, and a brainstem stroke survivor. In 2009, at the age of 38, he experienced a brainstem stroke due to a burst AVM while traveling on a trip of a lifetime with his family in Vietnam. Antonio spent 11 days in Saigon hospital, 5 of which were in intensive care, waiting for a rescue flight to return home to Melbourne, Australia, where he was admitted back into hospital to continue his recovery and undergo 3 months of rehabilitation. Now, just before we get started, if you're feeling a little disconnected from your support team due to restrictions from COVID-19 shutdowns and lockdowns, and you're looking for more support, you may want to consider Recovery After Stroke coaching. People that have already signed up for Recovery After Stroke coaching get 12 months of unlimited access, a private one-on-one coaching thread with myself via a private forum inside the coaching area. You have instant access to online training materials that can only be accessed by coaching clients. You get access to courses, monthly trainings, and challenges made by a stroke survivor for a stroke survivor. You also get expert interviews that are only available to coaching clients and MP3s you can download for listening on the go. All trainings are transcribed to PDF for people who prefer to read and take notes or highlight important bits for reviewing at a later time. You also get 2 live hour-long coaching calls per month with myself where you can ask questions and get answers. You can access the site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and complete training at your own pace without needing to leave the comfort of your own home. To find out more, simply go to recoveryafterstroke.com/coaching. And now it's on with the show. Antonio, welcome to the program, man.
Hey, Bill. Thanks for having me, mate.
Hey, it's good to have you here. Do you know that we've known each other since 2013?
That long. I remember meeting you on that day at the training. And I thought, who's his character? He's very likable.
At the Stroke Foundation training when we were training to become stroke safe ambassadors.
That's right, mate. You still doing it?
I am still doing it. I took a bit of a rest just recently because I was getting to the point where I had committed to a lot of other people for a lot of other things.
Okay.
And what I was finding was that all that stuff was taking up my time and tiring me out. And it didn't leave me with a lot of time to do the things that I wanted to do because, I'd be exhausted. I really enjoyed doing the Stroke Foundation talks, but at the same time, I realized it was sort of taking up my own energy, and giving that to other people is fine, but not at my expense.
Okay, that's fair enough, mate. Some of the other volunteers do the same. They just take breaks when they need to and come back if they can.
Yeah. So you still speaking for the Stroke Foundation, yeah?
Yeah, I'm still doing it. I have found that the last couple of years, it's the amount of talks I do are far and few between. And I think that's got something to do with when they lost their funding.
Yeah.
They've had to generate sort of funding through private resources, and that's just been taken a bit of time.
Yeah, it's really difficult because they're a completely funded organisation. Usually they're funded by the government and other private parties, but the program that we were on, the Stroke Safe talks and presentations, were purely funded for a short amount of time. They won I think it was 2 or 3 years worth of funding, and then when it ended, it ended.
Okay.
Something like that.
But I get a lot out of it. I have a lot of fun. I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's a good experience. Very exhausting in many ways, but what I walk away feeling good about myself. So
yeah. Tell me what happened to you, man. Why did you end up at the Stroke Foundation? What was the your path to sort of meeting me there?
Yeah. Um, like every other stroke survivor and the volunteers that are involved with the Stroke Foundation, it generally comes through having our own strokes. And I had a stroke in 2009. It was in my brainstem location, therefore caused quite a lot of damage. I was paralysed neck down, and I've had some vision problems and some hearing problems, speech, and I've spent a lot of years working hard to regain that.
Yeah, so that was in 2009. So, like, what happened on the day? What did you notice? What was happening to you on the day? Was it a normal day?
Yeah, I was traveling with my family in Vietnam at the time, and we were moments from entering underground war tunnels, and we we're just sitting in this shelter watching footage about the Vietnam War, and the guide was just discussing this and that about it, and I began to feel weak, and I excused myself and stepped outside to get some, well, fresh air, if you like, and drink some water, and within a few minutes I began to collapse and become weak and wobbly and vision blurred, and I couldn't even stand up, and a couple of people come to my rescue and brought me over to the first aid bay, and that was it. It took hold from there. It just wiped me right out. I went from being a healthy man to just completely paralyzed and lost all function of my body and had to be carried or dragged. I was such a dead weight that they couldn't even, I couldn't even assist them in carrying me to the bus. They would just literally had to drag me. Wow. And and then sort of pulled me onto the bus and to a local hospital.
Do you reckon was there any signs or anything that would have thought was leading to something serious?
The only previous sign there was, which is probably about 15 minutes before, and I was just about to step off the bus, and I felt a tingle in my palm, in my left palm, and a rumble in my ears, and I didn't think anything of it. I thought I was just, I was probably hot, and just, I looked at my hands and just thought, it's just be hot, and who knows what it is. But that was the first sign, and that rumbling ended up turning to hearing damage. The tingling in my left hand become losing function of that left hand and wiping out my whole left side.
Yeah. So what happens in a brainstem stroke? Because my stroke was inside my brain. Okay, so yours was in the brainstem, which is below. Is it sort of like at the base of the brain?
Yes. What you and I have in common, Bill, which we've discussed, is we both had something called an AVM, which is artery vein malformation. And what that is just we're born with a defect where a particular vein in our brain hasn't formed properly, and the likelihood of it to bleeding at some point in our lives is fairly high, and unfortunately happened to us when we were in the prime of our lives.
Yeah.
And yes, so my AVM, the bleed occurred in my brainstem, and because our brainstem is about only this wide, all the communication that goes from the brain to the body was just suffocated by blood.
Right. Wow. Okay. So you're in Vietnam and you've had a stroke. What happened, man? What did they do for you? Because I know that's a bit of a challenge, right? Getting some serious medical help in Vietnam is an issue.
It was a nightmare. And we weren't in a city. We were in a little rural village that was about, 2 hours from Ho Chi Minh City, which is previously known as Saigon. And so they just rushed me to a local clinic, and it was just chaos. That no one spoke English. They were trying to, my family was with me, and they were trying to ask for documentation, and the doctors were trying to look over me. And I was just, at this point, I was beginning to slur my speech and losing a bit of consciousness, and they didn't know what was happening. They couldn't work it out. They just couldn't work it out. They were testing, they were doing all my vitals and checking my eyes for the opening and closing, and checking my pulse, and everything seemed fine on that behalf. My blood pressure was good. All those things were okay. So they couldn't work it out at that point. Then they rushed me in like a little sort of van type of, I guess, what they called an ambulance. They rushed me back to Saigon, and that was just a chaos ride where I was in the back of this ambulance just getting thrown around, and there was a nurse there with a breathing mask, and my family was with my kids, my wife, my older kids in the front, and it was just you couldn't imagine. It was just absolute chaos, frightening. And then we got to the Saigon hospital, and I went straight in for an MRI, and within half hours I was in intensive care, and the doctors were telling me I've had a stroke. By that stage, I was just completely paralysed, and my vision had blurred, and my hearing was damaged. I could just mumble a few words, and that's where it began.
Yeah, it's not what we're used to with the medical model here. It's completely different to Vietnam.
Yeah, completely different. What I did notice though, once I was in the hospital and in the care of the doctors were all French, and they just happened to be working in Vietnam. And what I did notice, the duty of care was quite good, but there were things that kind of scared me, I guess. But I must admit, the kindness and the affection from the staff was just completely different than here in Australia. Like, they really looked after me on that respect. They weren't afraid to maneuver me and take my clothes off and do what they had to do to look after me. And I noticed that difference when I got to Australia. 11 days later, I had a rescue flight back to Australia, and I just noticed the difference how I was handled by the nurses here in Australia.
Right, so was the bedside manner over there better, do you feel?
It was better, although the standard of medical treatment definitely wasn't.
Yeah.
But the bedside manner was, I must admit, I become quite fond of the people that looked after me.
Yeah.
So and when I come to Australia, I just noticed there was a certain procedure that the nurses followed. And it's just legislation. It's just the way it works in Western countries.
Yeah, I had a bit of a problem with bedside manner as well, especially at the beginning. The first time I had, the first bleed, it was in Feb 2012. And what happened then was I went to the Austin Hospital here in Melbourne in Australia. And at the Austin Hospital, the care is amazing, right? Firstly, they've got the facilities, everything's right, but the doctors would turn up and they would talk at the end of my bed about me, not with me, and they wouldn't include me.
That's crazy you say that, because I have actually written a story about exactly that, and I referred to the doctors as mechanics, like they were looking at me from under the bonnet without actually touching me.
Yeah.
So that bothered you, did it?
It bothered me, man. That was crazy. So I tried to make a point of it a couple of times, but as you can imagine, when you're not in the right sort of state of mind to, make that an issue. And fair enough, you want them to sort of care for you. You just let it go for a little while. And I let it go. But then 6 weeks later, when I had the second bleed, I went back in there. I was in hospital for 3 days that second time. And it was the same kind of thing. And I got really frustrated. And a friend of mine works at the Royal Melbourne Hospital here in Victoria. And I said to him, because he was a radiographer, right? And I said to him, look, if you know somebody that will see me, that's going to talk to me and include me in the conversations, can you please organise a meeting? Because I don't want to be involved with doctors who talk about me and don't involve me in the decisions, that are going to be needed to be made about my well-being, whether it's surgery or whatever, So he hooked me up with this amazing surgeon, Professor Kate Drummond here in the Royal Melbourne, and she was just absolutely amazing. Yeah. And she's just given me the lowdown. She's allowed me to make my own decisions. She's informed me, and she just became somebody that I could confide in, speak to about things. And then I felt really comfortable with, at least I knew where I was at, and I was getting the version of bedside manner that I preferred. The medical help was the same. The amazing, medical facilities were all the same, but it's just that little bit of that personalized touch is
absolutely
really important when you're going through a really serious health condition,
Absolutely. Yeah, I understand that completely. Yeah. I found that the duty doctors were the same. Their manner was very distant, and they sort of spoke at me rather than with me. But there was an overseeing doctor who come to the hospital once a week or so, and he just had this lovely energy about him. He'd come and put his arm on me and ask me, hold my hand and ask me questions. And when he left, I just felt so much better. So there's much to be said about that kind of treatment when a doctor shows some kind of, I guess, affection, if you like to call it, or shows that they actually care about how you feel.
Yeah, a little bit of empathy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and look, sorry, go.
No, go.
I was just going to say, for people like you and I guess myself, having that kind of information where we can make decisions is helpful for our recovery, whereas many others, I guess, they're just happy to just listen to what the doctors say and just take it. Whereas I found I needed to know. I had questions. I wanted to know why and stuff like that. I wasn't just happy with it's because, or it may be this. Give me some details.
Yeah. I was kind of I want to know the lot, good, bad, or indifferent. I want to know the details. That way, I felt like maybe I could play some kind of a role in supporting my own recovery. Whether it was, I don't know, through any method that I could possibly bring to the table. At least now I know that there was something I could do. And it wasn't just a matter of, being in the care of somebody and handing over.
That's what it is. Yeah.
And being completely over the top, sort of faith, everything on the table for somebody else to take over. What if that doctor's having a bad day? And I don't want to think my doctors are having a bad day, but what if they are? And I don't want them to make a decision when they're having a bad day. I think I'd rather be informed. Now,
absolutely.
That's just me, so I know that other people will go to the doctors and they go to the hospitals and, like you said, they'll just allow the doctors to take over, take control. And blind faith is good does help in our model, in our medical model here in Australia, because they are extremely good doctors. We are one of the luckiest countries on the planet with regards to the kind of medical support. But at the same time, I don't know, like, I don't distrust people, but I like to test you in a nice way, ask you questions and see if you can give me answers. If you can't give me answers, I think you should be doing a little bit more research.
Yeah. But, I think also, in that state of mind, when you feel like you've almost lost everything, having some kind of, I guess, control and input to the outcome of your recovery is important. Not for everyone, for some. And it was for me, it was for you. And I'm going to tell you something, mate. Every time I've spoken to you, or every so often, and I've heard you've gone through an episode and you've had maybe another bleed, and mate, I get really pissed off because I've never had my AVM treated, and I just start, and it makes me worry because I know you've been through so many ups and downs, and I just thought, oh God, it makes me worry, and I start thinking the worst.
Oh, okay, interesting. So you've never had it treated, but see. I imagine that you're getting multiple sort of checkups regularly about it, yeah?
I used to at the beginning, but I've stopped doing that. I just found the whole process can cause a bit of anxiety, so I've kind of have veered away from doing that through my neurologist.
Yeah.
I'm constantly looking after myself and seeing my doctor and stuff, but I must admit, it's been a while since I last had a checkup with a neurologist. Look, I did try to have it treated, but the location of it being in the brainstem was incredibly dangerous. And when I did try to treat it, I was set up to have 11 radiation treatments, and after the first 2, I just felt like death, and so I pulled the pin on the whole procedure. Okay. I just lost complete faith in it.
Wow, so they were going to treat it by trying to zap it and get rid of it with radiation therapy.
Well, yes, because I first saw all the surgeons at Royal Melbourne Hospital, and they spoke about, going in and treating it, clamping it, injecting a substance into that vein that will, I guess, block it and heal it. But they all refused to touch it because of its location. They just had no faith in it. So they passed me on to an oncologist who tried to treat it with radiation. But, like I said, and again, it was back to that. If he filled me with a lot more confidence and perhaps a little bit more human contact, I probably would have seen it through to the end. But there was that distance. And when I was feeling really bad, I tried to contact him, and he just didn't fill me with faith and support. So I ended up pulling the pin. And my decision was made. I said to him, look, I'd rather live a short life with some kind of substance than a long life with complicated disabilities. And there was no guarantee that I wasn't going to walk away from that treatment, the radiation, in a worse state than I was already in. I could have potentially lost my vision. There was just no guarantee.
I'll give you a bit of an insight so that you understand the difference between you and me with regards to the fact that I had mine treated. So the first bleed was in Feb 2012. The last bleed was in November 2014. So we're coming up to the 3-year anniversary.
Okay.
From surgery. So 2014, we're in 2017. Yeah, so we're coming up to the 3-year anniversary from surgery. So
right.
In that time, I was seeing the doctors every 6 months, every 3 months, depending on how I was feeling, what was going on. And what they discovered was that it was micro-bleeding every single time, all day, always bleeding and continuing to cause micro-bleeds. The micro-bleeds got to the point where I was having a bad day and then it would go away. But then every so often, and the third time it had a really big bleed, and that's when I went into hospital having a really bad, having nausea, the whole works, had all the stuff. Right. Got to hospital and the surgeon said, right, enough's enough. We're not letting this bleed any further. We're going to take it out now. Because the risk moved from being in my favor to now not being in my favor, and now surgery was becoming the less risky option as opposed to not doing surgery.
I understand. Yep.
So when I went to the hospital and she said that, I was kind of like, well, okay, I'm up for that. Let's get this sorted and let's at least stop the bleeding, and whatever comes of it comes, because the bleeding could end in could end in death, or could end in an episode while driving, could end in so many different ways,
Yeah.
So we had surgery in November 2014, and when I woke up from surgery, that's when I had the left side weakness. So my arm, I couldn't feel my arm, I couldn't feel my leg. I had to learn how to walk again, use my arm again, and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, Bill, that sounds very scary. And
yeah, so very different from you, because you had one bleed, and what I was told at the beginning was, you're probably going to have one bleed, these things hardly ever leak again, and you'll be right.
Okay, well, yeah. Well, I mean, it's sad to hear that you went through that, but it's also good to hear that news, that it's just completely different, because I had that one bleed, and I did have many MRIs following my the initial stroke. So, and it was never any change. It's just over the last 3 or 4 years I've kind of slowed down. But maybe it's worth going in to have another MRI just to make sure it's okay.
Yeah. Tell me about the MRIs. How did you enjoy going into the tunnel?
I don't mind it. The noise gets a little bit overbearing. Yeah. But I've had them at a few different places, and some have had music to listen to. Yeah. Others have just had headphones to block out the sound. And to be honest, man, I just breathe through it and meditate, and it really, and it's over and done within half hour or so.
Yeah, awesome. That's why I asked you, because I couldn't go in for a long time and I had to get sedated, right? And
why not?
I used to get anxious. I used to start to hyperventilate and all that kind of stuff, and it was a big issue, right? So you can't go into one of those machines and waste half an hour and then waste another half an hour, because there's a lot of people waiting to get an MRI, right? So I used to tell them to sedate me, but then that causes other problems, because sedation's no good for the brain. So you don't want to really be sedated regularly after a stroke. And then somebody has to pick you up and take you home. And, you lose a whole day, and then you lose the next day. So it was a big drama. So I figured that what I'll do is I'll work a way out of it, which was to meditate through it. And I know that you meditate, so I wanted to have a bit of a chat about how beneficial you've found meditation and what your sort of process is for meditation.
Yep.
How does that help
Absolutely.
you?
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. you're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
Yeah, meditation helps me a lot. I since my stroke, I've always been interested in that side of, I guess, well-being pretty much my whole life. And after having a stroke, I've kind of reinforced that and began to follow, I guess, spirituality and meditation and positive believing. And yeah, meditation helps me. I've the stroke has caused a bit of anxiety, so it helps me just to, settle those anxious thoughts. And yeah, and any situation, it might only be, sometimes it might be a few minutes when I've pulled over on the side of the road to pick up one of my kids at school, and I'll just practice breathing. So yeah, it's very helpful.
Anxiety, were you somebody that was anxious before your stroke?
No, not really, no. I mean, I guess we all had some kind of anxiety. Maybe we didn't recognize it as anxiety.
Right.
But since the stroke, it's been, and I've had some terrible anxiety attacks and panic attacks and, depression, and have all those experiences that, are all part and parcel of having a stroke.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, a really important point that you just made, was that they're not pleasant. Anxiety, depression, of course, right? All those things. But they kind of are part of the process of what happens to people after a stroke. So as a carer, if somebody's listening or watching this on YouTube and they're a carer, they might kind of anticipate these things occurring. And one of the things that I did just by fluke, all right, I didn't anticipate depression. I didn't know that 33% of people that experience a stroke will have an episode of a depression at some point.
Okay.
I just went to a psychologist after the first time my brain bled, and I kept seeing her over the period between the bleed and surgery, so for 2 or 3 years, and I found that I overcame those thoughts of depression, especially after the second bleed and then the third bleed and then rehab.
Sure.
So it's part and parcel.
Being proactive.
Yeah, so that's kind of why I'm sharing it, as far as I didn't experience very bad depressive moments. But how bad did it get for you when it got bad?
It got pretty bad. I think I heard things, they don't really prepare you for this stuff when you're in hospital, because I guess, it's that they don't want to start to put those negative thoughts into your mind.
Yeah.
Focus on getting better, trying to achieve a strong recovery, learn how to walk. So any doubt they clearly try to avoid. But once you become an outpatient and you leave the hospital as an inpatient, you start to learn things, and and there's some conversation about potentially experienced depression, and you have access to psychologists at that point. And it didn't really hit me, depression. I mean, I was going through, I wouldn't have called it depression, but more fear, and dealing with the emotions attached to having a stroke. So it hadn't really formed into depression at that point. But then it hit me probably about 1.5 years later, when the reality of what my life was or is set in. When I had, and it was little things, when I was faced with little things like, it's crazy, but having to button your shirt, tie your shoelaces, walking out the front door, holding something and realizing you can't now lock the door because your one good hand is occupied, so you need to put stuff down. It was just, it's crazy, but it was those little things, those little realities that started to chip away at your hope and your spirit, and then it just sort of evolved into depression.
Yeah, and it makes sense how how when people compare how their life was before a stroke and now they're comparing it after, how that could be depressing. That just
Yeah,
makes sense. But if you focus on it a lot, well, then it becomes more and more depressing. And
yeah,
sometimes it's
absolutely.
hard not to focus on it a lot because it's happening to you every single day. When you want to tie your shoelace, when you want to brush your teeth, when you want to get in the shower, when you want to drive a car.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. It's you're right. It's highlighted, but you need to go through the process. You need to, I know it's really hard. It takes time, but it's really hard to see, I guess, see through the woods when you're in the middle of it. But you can get through the process and get out to the other side, and then you're able to look back and realize it's a long process. But I think being a stroke survivor and recovering from a stroke or any kind of serious illness, it's not only about, getting over what has happened to you, like, losing a limb or the function of a limb, or, relearning how to walk. It's not only those things, but it's the emotional impact that takes probably twice, three times as long to recover. And they're the kind of things you don't really learn about, or no one really educates you about. You just learn it by going through it and realizing that, the effects it has on you emotionally, how you're watching TV and you want to cry over something really silly, or, just affection is overwhelming, or kindness is just, it's all those little things where emotions are, I guess, exaggerated, that you start to realize that how it's affected you emotionally.
yeah, I think that's one of the big things for me. I became really emotional, cry at the drop of a hat, watching TV, all that kind of stuff, and didn't understand it, didn't know why it was happening. But I don't know, for me, maybe you can explain your version of that. But for me, it just seemed like I was tapping more into my heart than I had in the past. And I don't know why I was, but I just was. Maybe because my brain was sort of offline for a while
Yep.
and I had nowhere else to go. So I was just reflecting on all things that were important to me or mattered to me. Maybe because I thought I might die and all that type of thing. I'm not sure. But
Yep.
it was a really emotional time for me. And every once in a while, the emotions do still creep in. They still do catch up, and they still do, say, hey,
Absolutely.
we're still normal. We're human over here. You can have a bad day and all that kind of stuff. So I cry in public. I cry when I'm doing public speeches. I cry in front of family and friends. It just happens now. And now I don't
Yeah.
apologize for it. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
How is that similar to how you sort of experience it?
Absolutely, me too, man. Yeah, it happens every now and then. It's been 8 years for me, so I've overcome a lot of those emotions, but I still get caught out.
Mm.
Only recently I was, with a friend, and kind of a new friend that I've made, and I was discussing some of the, I guess, some of the hardship I went through, and
Mm.
I felt like crying. So it's still, and then 2 minutes later I was laughing uncontrollably, like I could just, and it was nothing to laugh about, but I was just laughing, and I just know that it's part of this brain damage. It's just part of the. So yeah, it takes a long time to adjust to.
Yeah, I'm talking about things that you laugh at right now. I know that a lot of people, I was really lucky. So when people look at me, they can't tell that I've had a stroke. Now, that's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It's a good thing because I don't look like I've had a stroke, but it's a bad thing because I experience internally the same challenges that people who look like they've had a stroke are experiencing. So
Yep.
fatigue, weakness in my left side, in my arm, constant tingling or burning sensation on my skin, balance problems, all that kind of stuff. So because I don't look like I've had a stroke, trying to explain something to somebody is a real challenge, right? Because they go,
Yes.
the eyes are going, you're trying to deceive me, like my eyes are looking at you, you look fine. So one of the interesting things that I did laugh at while I was in hospital was that when I couldn't walk yet, before I went to rehab and did a month in rehab, I needed to go to the toilet. After surgery, it had been 2 days and I hadn't done a poo. And the nurses said, you haven't done a poo, right? Right. Well, we're going to give you a laxative and the laxative will help get things going, so you can go because it's really important that you go. All right, I understand. No problem. So they got the ball rolling. They gave me the first laxative day one or by about day 2, and it didn't work. Nothing had happened. By the next day, they gave me another laxative. So now the laxative took hold and it started to work. And I really, really needed to go to the toilet. And I pressed the buzzer on my bed to get somebody to help me go to the toilet. And they weren't coming. So they weren't coming because they were busy with somebody else somewhere else in the hospital, right? And I needed to go. I couldn't wait for them to come. So I kind of dragged myself to my wheelchair, hopped to it and jumped in and tried to get to the toilet. And while I was getting to the toilet and opening the door, as I was about to sort of turn around into the toilet, the nurses came in. They said to me, "Well, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to get to the toilet, etc. You guys didn't come. I don't want to soil my pants. I don't know what's worse, going to the toilet and falling over, or soiling my pants, having you guys to clean it up." So I'm heading into the toilet. They seat me on the toilet, and now they're standing there. And I'm like, "All right, go." And they're going, "No, we can't leave." I said, "No, you have to leave." And they're like, "No, we can't leave. We can't leave you on your own because if you fall over and hurt yourself, we're responsible." I think I argued with them for 5 minutes while I was desperately trying to hold on so I didn't have to go to the toilet in front of them while they were in there. What do you talk to somebody about while you're in a dunny doing a poo?
Yeah. They're funny. They're funny now, but not when you were going through it.
No, it was a disaster when I was going through it. But thinking back now, it's kind of like, what were we going to talk about? The weather? Like the flowers? Like what?
Yeah, I know. I'm hearing you, mate. I had quite a few of those experiences. Yeah, but you have to hand your dignity in at reception when you get to hospitals.
Yeah.
When you go through something like a stroke.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that experience, but I had, I wore a diaper. Because exactly for the same reasons. I was, showered and manhandled by this massive, large black African man who sponged me down and gave me this beautiful shave and dressed me in these nice, fresh pajamas. What do you talk about when you're naked and there's a giant black man dressing you? Much to say.
How's the kids?
Those things happen to me too, man. I know it's good to laugh at it now, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And I share that because I know there's going to be people watching who have gone through or are going through it now, whose carers are probably going through it right now. And let me tell you, when you look back later, you can laugh about it. You may as well laugh about it now. If you can find a way to laugh about it now, just laugh about it now, man. Who cares? Why wait?
Yeah, absolutely. And laughter was real handy for me. I found that, even when I was in rehab and just starting to learn to talk, I'd, be making jokes and winding the doctors up and the nurses and just, bringing a little bit of lightheartedness to the whole ward. I found it was always so seriously. And I made a note when part of the therapy we would meet in, I guess, what they called the gym kitchen, and the patients would have to make their own breakfast and get their own coffee. It was just part of the therapy process. And when we used to sit around the whole table, it was just doom and gloom. Everyone would be talking about how miserable they are. And I went, right, guys, no talking about stroke. Let's talk about life, living. Let's talk about what we did before, what we love, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And it just, that was the rule. And I found that helped.
Yeah, and they would have found that it helped, and that would have been an amazing thing to experience. Somebody just say, let's talk about something that's good, because the rehab hospitals can be a tough place to be in, man. Even if you're somebody who knows you're going to get out of there, there's a lot of people that don't get out of there as quickly as you might have or as I might have, So bringing laughter into those situations, I think, is an awesome thing. Good on you. Yeah. Tell me, you mentioned a little bit about what you did in the past, right? So what were you doing before? Well, you're a family person, a family man. Yep. You've got kids, yeah?
Yes, I've got 3 kids. I was married, no longer married. I've had I've done a couple of different things in my life. I've been a musician most of my life, but leading up to the 5 years prior to my stroke, I worked in construction as a project manager, sort of / building supervisor. I did that for quite a number of years, and then the stroke just brought that to an absolute end. So I had a busy life. I was, active dad, working a lot of hours, like most people living that lifestyle.
How old were you when you had the stroke?
I was 38.
Yeah, wow. I was 37.
Now I'm 47.
Yeah, wow. Unreal.
And you?
I was 37, man.
Well, and I heard that AVMs statistically are more prone to bleed between the ages of 30 and 40.
Oh, my Lord. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what I heard. But statistics, what do they mean? Really.
I know.
But I know. Before I had an AVM, I didn't even know the illness that existed. And since I know about 4 people, you're one of them, and a couple of others who are stroke survivors that are part of a Facebook group who also had AVMs, and those 2 were in their late 20s when it happened to them. So,
doesn't discriminate any age, man.
Yeah.
So, you're a musician. What did you play? Were you a guitarist? What did you do?
I was a guitar player. You can see my
your axe.
Yeah. Yeah. I was a guitar player. It's a bit of a long story, but the stroke affected the function of my left hand, so I have limited use, and guitar playing is just not possible. So what I did was, a few years into my recovery, I bought myself an old piano and just began sort of playing and tinkering about one-handed. And I guess once you learn music, the notes and the hearing and understanding is all the same thing. So transferring that information from one instrument to another isn't so hard to do for someone that's been playing for a number of years. That's why you hear those stories where this musician can play 10 different instruments. It's because all the notes are the same. So I just began playing one-handed piano and composing and writing and using my stroke experience to create music, and sort of I just it's crazy because my stroke gave me an opportunity to dive back into being a musician and composing, and I wasn't bogged down with the day-to-day life of having a day job and all the stresses that come with it.
Yeah, right. So you've got more time to do stuff around music, and you've turned that into actually a bit of a way to make some money, right?
Yeah, that's right. Where I'm sitting right now is a small recording studio. So I've turned that that simple idea of being a guitar player, having a stroke, and then transferring that my musical understanding to a piano, and then it slowly began to evolve. I was writing songs, and I had a laptop, and we recorded, and then I bought more equipment, and it just grew. It took about 2 or 3 years, and then I developed this small recording studio, and I began advertising and producing music for other. Now I have a small portfolio of artists that I work with, and they come in and record music, and I produce for them, and and I do odd projects and poetry, record poetry, and whatever comes my way, and that's what I do myself these days.
Man, that sounds like it could be a lot of fun. So, so in the back you've got some stuff stuck on the wall. That's for making a good sound.
That's just an acoustic treatment. It's just to manage the sound, because where I'm sitting is the control room, not the recording room.
Uh-huh.
And when I'm listening to what I've recorded, I need to be able to hear it in an even balance. And by having that material on the wall, it minimizes wall reflection.
Uh-huh.
So therefore, what you hear is the true sound. You're able to manage it. Therefore, the end product is at the right balance, because you're not competing with reflecting sounds during the process. That makes sense?
It makes sense to me now. I actually understand what that means. So what I should have in the background here is a few egg cartons on the back of my wall as well. I started with egg cartons in the laundry. That was my first vocal booth, was in the laundry with egg cartons on the wall. That can work. The idea is to diffuse the sound with softer edges. That makes sense. So what could work is, as well, is like, maybe placing the microphone in front of a wardrobe where there's clothes that are suspended. Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean? So that when you're speaking into the microphone, it diffuses the sound in the back of the microphone. That makes sense?
That makes a lot of sense. It does to me now, because I've started to become interested in this. It makes sense. But I wouldn't know what to do. And, You know what? This is not about being the best kind of recording studio in my garage at my home. It's just actually about having a reasonable quality for people listening. So
Yep.
it's really interesting. Maybe we need to get together, and I need to
Yep.
get you to advise me and help me set up my home studio, mate.
Happy to help, mate. Like you said, mate, it's only to create podcasts, but you just by doing some inexpensive little tweaks, you might get a little bit of more clarity in the sound.
Yeah.
Which is more pleasant for the listener to listen to.
That's it, and that's what it's about. It is about the listener, and so is this podcast and this episode, right? So I want to touch on a couple of things. You're a dad, and you've got 3 kids. So
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about the experience that your family went through when their dad is having a stroke, man, and could die, and just going through all the stuff that you went through. What was it like for them? Do you know? Did you speak to them about it?
Yeah, I did speak to them about it. It was crazy because, when you're obviously most people would know, but when they're a father, the thing you do is protect your children. And so here we are in, this strange foreign country, Vietnam, and all of a sudden I wasn't there for them anymore. So, and through the panic, I kept asking my wife, are the kids okay? Are the kids okay? And she was just doing all she could to make sure they're okay and then looking after me. Luckily, we had some good people that just happened to be there by chance that assisted us through some of those scarier moments. But yeah, it was absolutely frightening. Even, being in intensive care and the visiting hours, my younger brother, within a few days of having the stroke, he flew over to Vietnam to lend a helping hand. And it was crazy. And that went on for years. Once you lose the ability to, I guess, provide on a financial level as well as an emotional level, a physical level as a father, it affects you. It fills you with guilt, and again, another process you're just not prepared for, and takes years to kind of come to understand that a lot of those things are not as important as to being a good dad and a loving dad, and being there at the very least for them. So that's what I focused on.
Yeah, that's interesting because I feel a little bit of guilt as well, right? So one of my sons is 21 and he's a musician and as well. So we were able to be a part of his life in a way that he really appreciated, which was to take him to shows that he was playing when he wasn't able to get there, to go and listen to him play at a band, with his band at a pub or whatever. So we got a lot out of that, and he got a lot out of us going there. So even though this whole process started for me 5 years ago, we were still able to turn up and support him. While my youngest son, he loves being out and about in nature, right? So camping and all that kind of stuff. But that's become a lot harder for me since I've experienced this, right? So now to get ready and to go for camp, for me is a big drama because by the time I get there, I'm really exhausted. Then I got to set the place up.
A lot of effort.
Yeah. And if I'm not there for a long time, it's difficult. So my left side gets a lot colder than my right side. So if we go to camp and it's a cool night out in the bush, it's really uncomfortable for me to be out there.
Yeah.
And I've really enjoyed sort of going camping with him, but we haven't been able to go out there enough because I'm not as resilient as, somebody who hasn't experienced a stroke. And it makes it a lot harder for me to go out there and stay out for longer periods of time. So I've missed that connecting with him in that way, and that's really made it difficult for me. Now, I know it's not my fault, but when he's a child at 12, it's really difficult for him to understand that.
Yeah.
And as well, when he looks at you and he says, Dad looks fine, it's even harder to convince a 12-year-old that I'm really struggling or I'm suffering,
When you look okay, I understand that completely.
Yeah, so it's a problem. Yeah. So I did the whole thing that you just spoke about, which was be there, show them love, tell them you love them, give them a hug, give them a kiss, do all that kind of stuff. But what else can you do? What are the unique other tweaks that you found that might have worked for one child that didn't work for another?
Well, see, because the age gaps between my kids when I had my stroke, the two older ones were at that time 5 and 8. whereas my little one, she was only 10 months old.
Wow.
So she hasn't seen the difference. She doesn't remember the previous me.
Yeah.
But whereas my 5-year-old at the time and 8, which are now 14 and 17, they remember, going swimming and, doing those things where I'd throw them off my shoulders and, going to the park and go for a bike ride and kicking a ball around. They remember some of that. So Maddie, my little one, doesn't remember that. So the way I've been able to compensate, I guess, is do things with her that she could be, getting on the floor and playing Barbie dolls with her.
Yeah.
Just because kids measure love by time, how much time spent with them. They don't, sure, the affection, and they adore that. My daughter loves that, but it's about time. It could be as simple as sitting down and watching a film that she wants to watch together and showing her that you're cooperating with her on her level rather than, on your level. So, and I found that worked with Maddie. My older two, I guess they understood a little bit more, and as they grew, I mean, look, you can see that I'm a stroke survivor. The way I walk, my kids can tell. They know. I get tired easily. They see it. So we talk a lot about that, and I say to them, I love to do that, but it's too tiring. Or okay, we'll go to the beach, but I can only stay for 3 or 4 hours because it's just too long for me.
Yeah.
So, and they completely understand that. And now that they're growing, I've seen them. They'll say things like, "Oh, Dad, but you'll get tired." Or, "Dad, if you're too tired, that's okay. We'll do it another time." Or so they've come to understand it really well. But yeah, if I could, that's one of the things that took a long time to, I guess, get over. And it was that guilt. And I want to be there and and do all those things, kick a footy around and go to the park and ride a bike. I miss all that stuff, but I've had to substitute it with other good ways, like I've said.
Yeah. What was interesting when we spoke last week, about a week ago, was you said something that was interesting. And I think a lot of people who experience a life-changing health condition go through, unfortunately, separations and divorce.
Yeah.
And did you go through that
Yep.
after your stroke?
Yes.
At some point,
Yes.
right? So after how long did you guys sort of go your separate ways?
It wasn't that long, but there was, like all separations and divorces, there's obviously a process. It doesn't just snap and suddenly you're separated. It was a process of breaking down and not communicating and growing apart. And I think that sort of began. I mean, I guess, to be honest, there was, some kind of uneasiness through the marriage. The stroke was, as I like to refer to it, as the straw that broke the camel's back.
Right.
And it took about 3 months after the stroke that it just began to get a little bit difficult, and there was a separation period, and then following the separation period, after so many months, 6 or 8 months, that it became a divorce.
Now, you guys do a really good job of managing this divorce, right? And then looking after your kids together. It sounds like you guys have got a really good arrangement and understanding about co-parenting.
Yeah, we have. We work towards doing that. We still communicate. We've even had a together, which was only like 6 months ago. We went to Burma. The whole family, my ex-wife, myself, the kids, and so we work hard at being friends. What's the point of not being friends? We've got kids together. We need to be in each other's lives. We need to communicate. So, I'd much rather have peace than unhappiness in that situation.
Now, there's another thing that you told me, which I found really amazing, actually, and I never considered it as a benefit, is that now you have the kids half the time and your ex-wife has the kids half the time. And when you have the kids, it's really tiring for a stroke survivor to go through the process of raging, just being a dad for 3 amazing, energetic kids, right?
Yeah.
And then when they're at their mum's, you get a time to unwind and relax and come back to yourself and regain your energy, right?
Yes.
And that's something that a lot of people wouldn't have expected as being a benefit of co-parenting children.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's been And that like you said, that time to unwind doesn't necessarily mean rest. It means time to do your own thing, and and step away. And I mean, you're always a parent, but step away from just being a parent and be able to do the things that make you happy for your own purposes. And that encompasses being a parent, but so it gives you time to separate yourself from those, I guess, those responsibilities, and pursue the things you love, like music, and then and that brings you energy. The things you love, the things you enjoy doing, brings this sense of purpose, this happiness, and all those positive things bring you energy, and you're able to overcome fatigue through those channels. And and that gave me time to enjoy my kids a lot more when I felt recharged.
Yeah. Rather than being constantly tired and constantly trying to ask them to quieten down or pick up after themselves, or just be, playing the dad role.
Yeah.
You can actually just take it easy for a few days and then get to see them when you're not so grumpy.
Yeah. So, because you're with your kids 24/7, so
I'm grumpy.
you'd have those challenges of, days where you just need to shut down. And it's hard to, like you said, I'm sure it's hard for you to relay that information to your kids when they look at you and you seem perfectly fine, but your brain just needs to go into a quiet place and let your body recover. Visibly, it's they can't see it visibly, but that's how you feel. That's the hardest thing to.
Yeah. It's difficult to explain it to anybody. My wife, my kids, people around me, everybody, right? So I suppose sharing this type of information, maybe some people will come across it and it'll make a difference. They'll understand like where we're coming from, rather than sort of having no idea of what it's like to be around somebody who's a stroke patient or a stroke survivor. What's interesting, we also spoke about sound and how noise can really tire you out and interfere with, your energy levels.
Yeah.
Now, you are involved with music and that makes a certain amount of noise. Now, is there a difference between that type of noise and the standard running around TV kind of, house kind of noise? Is there a difference? Do you notice it?
There is a difference. I find that there's some defining differences, and I find that, first of all, it is still fatiguing working with sound, and and I can only have a time span where it gets too much. Like maybe 4 hours. If I'm working with a client, I don't really work more than 4 hours. We'll keep our sessions at 4-hour minute maximums. But the difference also is when it's background noise, like noise that you're not paying attention to, it becomes a little bit overwhelming and irritating. It's like something just picking at the back of your brain. So, for example, if I'm sitting on the couch and the TV's on, but I'm not really watching it, and I'm on my phone doing something on the internet, I find that background noise of the TV really irritating.
Yeah.
So I'll mute it if I'm doing something on my phone, and that's the same for like family noise, kids running around screaming, whatever, pots and pans being banged around in the kitchen, all those kind of noises. It's background noise that sort of eat away at you and creates a sort of a brain frazzle and fatigue.
Yeah, and my experience as well. It's really amazing how the brain gets impacted. So I imagine that people who haven't had a stroke are also experiencing that tiredness that noise creates, but they're not aware of it because they have a relatively healthy brain.
Yep.
But it may be sort of also interfering with their energy levels, but they're just not totally aware of it as we are, or as sensitive to it as we are.
Sure. Yeah, it's like I think we're having a brain injury. It's just everything is just so exaggerated. It's just amplified.
Yeah.
So every person we feel it the same, but just it's such an extreme amount and volume.
Yeah. Now you've been able to get back to driving as well. So
yes.
Was there a time that you weren't able to drive?
Yeah. Yes. The first, it was probably took about 10 months or 8 months, 9 months to get back into driving. At the beginning, I just couldn't, it's like my brain was locked inside this tube. I could not make sense of the outside world for many, many months. And I even remember the very first time I went for a drive in my dad's car. Well, not driving, as a passenger. During my rehab, he took me out for a day or whatever it was. And just that experience of moving in a car was just like it was just like I was in a time warp. Things were just, I can't explain it. It was madness. So and the brain just took time for it to adjust and understand what was going on in the outside world. And then, like about 9 months in, I was bugging my occupational therapist for me, because I needed to resit my driving test, where lots of people who have brain injuries do. And I just bugged her and said, I want to drive. I'm sick and tired of being taxied around. And she was like, no, you're not ready for it. You're not ready for it. I'm going, just put my name on the list and I'll have a go at it. If I fail, then I'm not ready. No, you're not ready. There's an 8-week waiting list. And I'm like, I was a pain in the ass. I kept bugging her and bugging her. And I said, I want to drive before Christmas. There's only 4 weeks before Christmas. And then we've got the 4-week break and you won't be driving until April. I'm going, just put me on the list. And then if it happens, then what do you know? 2 weeks later, I get a phone call. And, I sat my driver's test and it took 2. I didn't pass. I had 2 lessons and then, got my license back.
Isn't it amazing how much of an independence you get back when you're able to drive, and how you need to stop relying on people? That's one of the things I remember. I had my drivers as well, my dad, my brother, my wife, everyone was driving me wherever I wanted to go. But I felt such a burden when I was asking people to ring me, to come over and drive me, because I had to go. I had to go, and fair enough, on their terms as well, not just on my terms. I need to go there today. I needed to go on their terms when they were available, and I didn't enjoy asking, but I know it was necessary to ask, and I didn't feel bad about it. But it was kind of like, crap, I wish I could just drive, and I was really motivated to get back to driving as well. So my heart goes out to the people who lose their independence because they can't drive.
Yes. I have stroke survivor friends who have not been able to get back to driving because of their circumstances, and it must be tough. But I also believe that that's a sign that drive to get your independence back is, I guess, a bit of a sign of the spirit within that person who's determined to get as far as long as they can get along this stroke journey and recovery. Because it's so easy to surrender and go, you know what, this has happened and I'm just going to rely on taxis and people, driving me around. But that wasn't enough for me. I need my independence back.
Yeah. So tell me, was there any modifications needed to be made to your car, or what type of modifications?
Very small. One modification. Well, not even a modification. I had to just get a bolt-on spinning wheel on the steering. Those. You can imagine those. They are handled with one hand.
The bumper cars. Arm. The bumper cars have them, or the Dodgem cars.
Yes, that's it. I've just got one of those on my vehicle, so I can drive one-handed. But my left hand's I would say it's about 25% good. I'm able to steer, and I often steer the car with my left hand just as a bit of a practice. But that's the only modification.
So your left hand, you've got a challenge with your left hand. Your left foot, can you feel it? Do you have any pins and needles or anything like that on your left foot?
It's a tight. The left side of my body is really tight.
Same.
And that intense sort of pins and needles. My left hand is often cold.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a numbness. It's crazy. It's hard. It's like although there's numbness, but there's this heightened sensation. It's
at the same time. That's me, right? So when somebody touches my hand gently, it really hurts. But when you touch it heavily, it's numb.
Yeah, it's kind of all those things. Like I can feel the slightest thing, but then I'll put my hand on a hot plate and not feel that it's burning until it hurts really bad. Then
I know.
It's
sorry for laughing, people listening, but it's just also funny. Sorry, but that's what happens to me. It's the same kind of thing. And I can't help but laugh when I burn my hand, and it's because I didn't notice that I was holding onto something that was hot for a little while. It's like one split second longer than
Yeah,
the other
exactly.
hand, and it's just enough to make it terrible.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's happened. That happens to me too. Yes.
Um, Man, I really enjoyed actually getting to know you, being your friend, and
Me too, mate.
bumping into you from time to time. I really love your story. I love your get up and go. I love your fight. I love your spirit. I love your brutal honesty about what you went through and what it's like and the challenges. It helps me feel better about my situation when you talk about your situation, because I see I'm not alone. And I never want that for you. I want you not to feel all the things that you feel, because I know what it's like. But do you know what I mean? It still kind of helps me to understand that there's another person that gets me. That's kind of what I like about our relationship,
Yeah.
amongst other
Yeah, same
things,
here. Thank you, mate. It's really important that people like you and I and others who go through these kind of experiences connect to help each other along the journey, and then pass it forward. I often reach out to others and give them my perspective on the experience, and hopefully it helps them, because it's a hard slog. There's so many things you got to deal with, the depression, all that stuff, along with trying to recover.
Yeah.
So by hopefully passing it forward, it helps them avoid, like you said, going through the pitfalls that we've gone through.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Now tell me, where can people find out more about your recording studio and the work that you do, especially if they're in Melbourne, right? And they're an artist who wants a little bit of studio time and a little bit of production. Where can they go?
You can find my studio online. My website's down now, but there's a Facebook page. Even if you Google Studio 499, and that's studio, the word 4 and the number's 99. So 499 is just my address, and so that's the business studio name, and that's how you'll find me. Often, you Google that, and there's links to music that I've created, bands that I've been involved in, and so it's all. There's no escaping, man. We live in the big world of the internet, so
They'll find you somehow if they want to find you. I'll put the
I'll find.
link. I'll put the link to your website on the notes of the show as well. Is it going to be back up and running soon? And the Facebook
No,
page.
I haven't got it up. I'm not sure when I'm going to get up and running, but you can either do that or my Facebook page,
Yep.
my studio page. The reason my website is down is just that I found that it wasn't the source of my, I guess my client base never really come through the website, so I just decided to pull it down and rebuild it and focus on it another time, and I haven't got around to it.
Yeah, I know the whole "I haven't got around to it" thing. You'll get around to it at some point, man. Whenever the time comes, that'll be fine.
Yeah.
Antonio, man, it's been amazing having a chat with you. Thank
You
you
too,
so
Bill.
much.
Good talking to you, mate. Thank you very much.
I look forward to keeping in touch with you
All right,
and
talk to you soon.
helping each
Yeah,
other
buddy.
out.
Ciao, mate.
Discover how to heal your brain after stroke. Go to recoveryafterstroke.com.
Medical disclaimer: courses, podcasts, and website. Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the experiences of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. This information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injury circumstances or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professionals. If you are experiencing a health emergency or you think you might be, Call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.